I'm Melanie Swayze, a global real estate advisor with Gibson Sotheby's based in Metro Boston. I closely advise homebuyers and sellers of all stages of life, guiding them to intelligent, winning decisions.
I'm Derek Lumpkins, a real estate investor with a background in community organizing. I also enhance equity and inclusion initiatives at companies and organizations, and I guide leaders through executive coaching.
When we get together, we dive into the intersections of culture, class, mindset, and Black freedom.
Welcome to the Black Landing Forum,
a podcast about Black wealth, power, and land.
Hey, what's going on?
Oh, Derek, good to see you.
Good seeing you too.
Happy Mamdani month.
Yes, I guess we are at that point. Yes. Can you imagine if that actually got renamed? If you had other than the actual inauguration, I mean, the right wing would lose.
Let's not taunt. Yeah, let's not. Okay.
But no, you're bringing up one of the most exciting political events in a while, actually, at least for people on the lefty progressive side, is the election of Zohran Mamdani. I know, I love that middle name. I didn't expect that. When I saw it, I was like, wait, that's his middle name? So yeah, that's really cool. And of course, there's a lot of excitement for his mayoralty. Is that what it's called? The position when it's in office, his mayoralty. And a lot of hope for what he will be able to perform and or enact. So, wishing him all the best.
Yeah, and I would say beyond New York City, I think, as we could hear in his victory speech, that was a national level dialogue that he was holding with us. And I think it's big picture. And I also think, though, that he and supporters around him will take important efforts to make sure that he doesn't become the face of, that what we need in this time is not a face of the party or a movement. What we need is broad-based leadership that the broader public is holding these leaders to account for. So, I mean, I just hope that, he's not just held up as a symbol, because I think, one, that makes him a target, and two, it's just not realistic. Putting leaders on pedestals like that is just impractical.
It's impractical, and it lets the rest of us off the hook. We just focus all our energies on one person. You can do it all. You're the person on the pedestal. You're the one who's supposed to take care of it all. And we just relinquish our own responsibility. Like, we have a collective responsibility.
Agency. Right. So rather than being disappointed, get activated, which I think that's a specialty of his campaign. And my understanding is that I think it's like 100-something thousand volunteers who helped get people out to vote for him are now an organization that's going to be somehow a go-between between grassroots organizations and city government. So I just think these are models that we want to be looking to of leadership and accountability.
Yeah. And I didn't get a chance to hear the entirety of his acceptance speech.
Meanwhile, I literally played it on repeat all day the next day. I probably listened to it a dozen times.
Are there one or two highlights that you would want to bring up in terms of this conversation?
What's funny? So that was is that 2 weeks ago? That was 2 weeks ago, believe it or not. So in my brain, I don't have anything right off the top. A lot of it was about his tone. A lot of it was about his defiance. I was thinking about him in the context of Boston's mayor, who's been really firm vis-a-vis the federal government about protecting the city of Boston and protecting the rights of people of all walks of life who make their home in Boston. And I felt a kind of defiance from him. It was so explicit, literally in his phrase, turn the volume up, like, you better be listening. That kind of command in saying, I know that there are so many of us. There are so many of us. So that's one of the things that I took away from it, is that confidence that there are so many people of all stripes and walks of life who are ready to protect basically democratic values and institutions. And that's the main thing.
Yeah. And just one last thing, just picking off a piece of what you said. I find that the mayors are the ones, at least from what I'm seeing, are the ones who are really the most vocal. So the mayor of Boston, the mayor-elect of New York City, the mayor of Chicago, the mayor of LA, kind of sort of, not as much as the other mayors. And the the two governors that I think are really kind of like taking a stand, of course, Gavin Newsom in California, but also
Pritchard?
she's still governor, but the governor in Maine, she has something to say. She had something to say a couple of months back that I was like, oh, because
Pittsburgh is no joke. The governor of Illinois?
I'm just not hearing enough.
Oh,
I shouldn't say I'm not hearing enough. I'm not hearing a lot.
He's giving voice
about Maine and about California
from the Midwest, and he is not playing. And he's especially been very outspoken about the attacks on. It's not even on immigrants at this point. It's attacks on brown people in the streets. And he's making it very clear. This is not just happening in Chicago. This is happening literally in suburbs and all over the state. Mm-hmm. And again, a kind of defiance about that. And I heard him say in an interview recently, I don't even know why the country's not talking about this. Why is the country not talking about what's happening on the ground all over this state? Right. And so the media also mediates so much about what we hear and what we know and what we prioritize about where people are actually taking a stand. But also to say, Derek, that it's always the case that mayors and governors, and I would say in more and more what we've seen in the last 8-10 years is attorneys general, states attorneys general, but especially mayors, because they're the closest to the people. And as Ayanna Pressley, who's representative in the House for Massachusetts, says, that real leadership is usually closer to the hurt, closer to the pain. And so in a place where you're talking about city level government, mayors are held directly to account about what happens and what can't happen on the streets, and people can make their demands in a very immediate way. But that also means you can be really innovative and play. And I think that's part of what's frustrating to the federal government is you've got some of these cities being like, no, this is what we're going to innovate. This is what we're going to hold to. And so I think that's one of the places where we can support our leaders is at the municipal level. And more, I think county level, we saw a lot of that coming out of this major election too. It wasn't just that we got this historic election in New York City, but that you had these more center and center left wins all around the country, but not just the big positions that you typically think of. They were like county positions, sheriff type positions. And so that's the thing that the right has been really, really good at for decades. And
yes,
that's a place where we need to be also putting our attention, is that regional level from like school boards up.
Yeah, from dog catcher up. Yes.
True.
Absolutely. And just thinking about getting back to Zohran Mamdani and him being mayor of New York City, it's not just like some city of 100,000 or half a million people. That city has the population of multiple states combined. So it comes with a lot of responsibility. It comes with a lot of power. And it comes with a lot of people, huge budget, and a lot of people who also need to participate in the system. They can't just, say, great, he's there, and now we're done. So, but anyways, I think we have a guest who has a lot to say about this as well.
Yes, we have a return guest today, our friend Adam Susaneck. We've become friends on this podcast, architect and urban planner. One of the things Adam is known for, including in the social media space, is his ongoing project, Segregation by Design, which aims to catalog the destruction caused by mid-century urban renewal and highway projects, and to highlight the work that advocates are doing to heal the divide. Adam has also written for the New York Times, and we're happy to bring him back on.
Hey,
Adam.
Nice to see you. Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for coming back. Good to see you again.
As always.
So I think I already know the answer to this question, but how are you feeling about Zohran Mamdani's election?
I'm, quite excited. I was there. I was lucky enough to be in town when the election happened. I was at a dive bar in Brooklyn, the sort of classic, you see it on TikTok, like when an election goes well, it's like the classic dive bar scene and everyone starts cheering because they're showing it on CNN. I had watched elections in a bar before, like I had gone out to watch an election, but I have never had a good result when I've done that. So it's always ended in like disappointment. But that night it was like, not only was it a good result, it was fast. So, I was in bed by like 11. So it was super fun. And the energy in the city was incredible afterwards. I was really worried that we were all really worried it was going to be close because of all the polling errors that have been happening in the past elections. But, it was great. And I was also, closely following elections in Jersey and Virginia too. But Jersey is a context I'm familiar with. So yeah, it was great. I'm very excited. We'll see. He has a very ambitious agenda, of which I agree with. Essentially all of it. So if I were a New Yorker, I certainly would have voted for him. I don't think that's any surprise. And in the primary too, it's exciting that I don't live in New York. I'm from South Florida, but I went to grad school in New York. I lived there for a long time, for some time, whatever. I lived there for a while. I have connections with that place. And the past election cycles for mayor, there hasn't been an exciting mayor in a long time. There's been exciting candidates. Cory Johnson a while ago. Jermaine Williams has run a few times. Brad Lander, Scott Stringer's is pretty good. But it was Eric Adams last time, which wasn't the most exciting. I'm sure I'm forgetting.
De Blasio was like the last big election of I think promise, where people thought that they would see major change. And I think that ended up being a letdown, like very kind of centrist kind of letdown situation. So I think this is historic levels.
Yeah, and de Blasio, looking back, did get a lot of good stuff done. It's just that he kind of missed a lot of opportunities. But universal pre-K, that's an incredible.
Yeah, that's huge. That's true.
And there's positives to Bloomberg too, but he's not obviously the one I'm most excited about. So long story short, very excited for Zohran. His plan is super ambitious. Some of it's outside of kind of the jurisdiction of the New York mayor, but the role of the New York mayor is kind of a coalition. Well, they have a lot of power, so they can do stuff directly, and we'll talk about that later. But there's also the coalition building because Albany and the feds, but there's the whole structure in New York that makes things complicated. Yeah, but long story short, very excited.
What excites you, Derek? What things stand out for you?
One, I think I'm excited about just some of the ways in which it seems like he's going to bring in, as Adam referenced, a broader coalition of people. Because a lot of times you have these elections, they're sort of put out there as change elections. But you really don't see that many people in City Hall or in the departments and the administrations really changing. There's a lot of entrenchment there. So I don't really see a lot that changes. I'm excited to see who is on his transition team. I don't really know them very well, but it's an all-female transition team. So I think they're going to bring in a lot of different ideas, a lot of different energy. And of course, they're also all very experienced in their fields as well. So it'll be interesting to see how they begin to handle their hiring and what kind of changes they enact. So there's just some, for what I'm excited about is very entry level, because I just don't know enough. I haven't been following that closely, but I feel like this seems like it could be a change election that really does result in some real changes that we haven't seen in generations.
Yeah, I think he has some pretty heavy hitters on his transition committee. One of them, whose name I'm forgetting right now, but Lena Khan, who had been, I believe, chair or a chair at the Federal Trade Commission as a very young adult, who's like a genius and has been holding the big tech companies to account. She's on his transition team. And I just think there's real power there's real power forming around him in a way that's actually has potential to make change.
Yeah, I mean, it's within the context of New York, so that adds a whole other layer that complicates things. But
let's dive in, because as you say, you've got more context too about there are layers. You're referring to layers, so let's go into the layers.
Oh, well, it's tough to kind of take any national lessons from this, because it's not a national electorate, right? It is New York, which is quite diverse, but not necessarily in the same way that the country is. Yeah, he's uses kind of national like language, but he really, one of the reasons he was able to kind of just start from, being an assembly member in Queens and launch this so fast is because it's not just kind of like flowery language, which everyone has these days, although seemingly not Cuomo. But he was talked about like really specific New York stuff that needs to be fixed. And yeah, affordability is one of those, which is why it gets this like national attention. But buses, and specific projects that to implement Queenslink, and raising caps on like municipal bonds for housing.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a really good one. That's one I'm very much in favor of. These are all New York specific things that I think is one of the main reasons he got so popular. Isn't just the language, isn't just the sort of, and I'm not saying that that's what you were saying, but it's not just this sort of generational reaction to Trump. Basically, it's not just that. It is a New York thing, and it's a reaction as much to Eric as much as it is to Trump, Eric Adams. But it's exciting, and he's very young. He's same age as me. But he's clearly read Team of Rivals and books like that. Like he knows to surround himself with a smart team. He's very smart. He's not he's not a crazy person like so many of our other politicians are. He knows it's good to have competent people around you, because his goal is like very clearly that's another thing. His goal is very clearly to serve New York City, not to just become to enrich himself as it is with so many other politicians. It's so clearly that he's not worried about, like in the same way that Cuomo is always, about other rival forms of power or people, power institutions forming. He'll just bring on the best people to do the job. But the New York context is basically like it's he's probably not going to be able to run for president like everyone wants him to. I don't think he's even eligible because he wasn't born here. You know what I mean? He is. I think he was born in Uganda. Okay. Yeah. But just very excited to see what he does in New York. And he ran, it's a very physical campaign. Like when you're running for mayor of New York, you talk about stuff. You talk about buses, you talk about sidewalks, you talk about scaffolding. And they don't all do that. And the fact that he did, I think, really connected with people.
Like the infrastructure of people's daily lives, what people actually have to create to make their lives work. And that's why this broad array of immigrants and first generation people could get behind him, because they live that life in these neighborhoods where they are dependent on infrastructure that is limited and that's failing them. So that's powerful, because it in this instance, it really feels like the people are hiring him. It's the people. It's not political networks. It's like, in spite of all the money that was put into the campaigns to oppose him, the people overshadowed that. So I think that's another thing that stood out to me from election night, Derek, is that this was against all odds. And I don't think this is just a redress of who's in the government right now, but as Adam says, it's like people literally are at the brink about how they can afford their lives. And here's someone being like, all right, let's innovate. And how do we do this? And he did that from a true, real grassroots listening campaign. I happen to know someone who is related to one of his best friends who actually sat him down and convinced him to run. Like, they had to convince him to run. This wasn't like, a lifelong ambition of his, or even an ambition during his career, right? He was doing his assembly person work. And so to understand that, like, he has a certain kind of voice, a certain ability to compel people and to brainstorm ideas and to be bold. Yeah, all of those things are really important in an individual. But what it does mean is, okay, how do we, as Adam says, get really, really smart people around us to start doing things fundamentally different and be bold enough to say that what we've taken as the status quo just truly is not working, and not even care what people think about the name of your political affiliation. I think that's the other thing, like all this grassroots growth. People are like not that concerned about what the word democratic socialist means. What they care about is housing, public transportation, being able to afford food, being able to get food. I mean, it's just very basic stuff that's almost embarrassing that we have to be talking about. Or how do you even, afford school for your kids, like, and childcare? This is basic stuff. So to me, it's exciting and empowering that people are becoming bold enough to say, we actually want leadership to articulate these basic things that we're willing to fight for and no longer take for granted. Like, we realize we have to fight for these basic things. And that's radical, apparently, but okay. So I think
it's really not.
But what we consider radical is actually becoming way more broad-based, because people can't afford to consider it radical. They can't afford to think, wow, I don't think I want to be affiliated with that party name. No, it's like, actually, we're all in the same boat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think it's radical at all. I don't think it's that radical at all. I mean, part of what you were saying was reminding me of when Obama was running and when he was elected. It wasn't so much about affordability and some of the things we're talking about now, but it was, again, one of those against all odds kinds of elections where, who really thought when the whole campaign was getting started that Obama would be the one who would win? So I can see it kind of as an against all odds.
Higher stakes now. I think that campaign was very symbolic for the country. It's right. It was important, but even though Barack Obama ran as a former organizer, he's not really a leftist candidate. And so I think to have somebody who's truly hugging what you consider leftist values in politics and pulling that in to have everyone recognize, no, this is basic stuff that we all need. And in a way that, again, going back to Adam, is about infrastructure, the daily needs of people's lives on the ground, is really, that to me is even more powerful, honestly, on some level. I mean, yes, it was just historic and like identity shifting for so many of us to have someone like Barack Obama become the leader of our country. But I still think that a lot of that was about symbolism that is important, and representation is important. This other stuff here is about economics. And for us to like grab back hold of economics where you don't have a broad-based worker movement in the United States is a big deal. To have a big city like New York City, that's the size of whose budget is like the size of some countries' budgets, to actually start innovating. And I think that people are going to watch and learn. I think other cities are going to get more bold. And if more and more cities get more bold, then we're going to actually see some real change in politics.
Hey, what's going on?
Oh, Derek, good to see you.
Good seeing you too.
Happy Mamdani month.
Yes, I guess we are at that point. Yes. Can you imagine if that actually got renamed? If he had like other than the actual inauguration, I mean, the right wing would lose.
Like, let's not taunt. Yeah, let's not. Okay.
But no, it's you're bringing up one of the most exciting political events in a while, actually, at least for people on the lefty progressive side, is the election of Zohran Mamdani. I know, I love that middle name. I didn't expect that. When I saw it, I was like, wait.
I think rhetorically, right, in terms of the sort of generational big picture shifts, Zohran has a lot in common with Obama. But then policy-wise, obviously he's more in the camp of someone like Bernie. But I think he understands also that he's mayor of New York.
Okay.
And from what I've seen, he's hiring a bunch of Elizabeth Warrens, which is great. So people who are all about plans and details, and the label is less important.
Yes.
It's exciting. Again, we'll see what happens. If you have any open positions in the DOTs or on, I'm willing to move back to New York. It'd be great.
Well, we're actually hoping we can try to get him for an interview. So, if we get him, we'll tell him about you. If you get him, please tell him about us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll make a little pact. I just want to say one thing about representation in Mamdani, because
yes,
with the current climate around immigration or being anti-immigrant and him being an immigrant, even though he didn't specifically talk that much, as far as I know, because again, I'm not in New York City, and so I don't really know how much he went into that. But I know other people did talk about that. They talked about immigration. They talked about his immigrant status. Well, he's a resident now. He's a citizen now. But that was important. And also, again, because it's New York City, that took on a different level of importance than it would have, I think, for a lot of other people in a lot of
he took on big attacks because of it.
Important.
He took on big attacks from Cuomo because of it, and he spoke to that in his speech.
Cuomo and the rights. It was everywhere, and Adams as well. It was on all sides.
Absolutely, yeah. So to me, that is representation, but I think it's representation plus. It's like I'm actually going to protect immigrants. Like he named out specific neighborhoods, like just to say you are actually in City Hall now. One of the things that I played over and over again was where he referenced that taxi driver that he had done a hunger strike with, a 15-day hunger strike with. So, my brother, we're in City Hall now. Like that stuff would make you weep. So it's representation, and it's saying we're pulling you in. We're pulling you into actual political and economic representation, not just identity kind of affirmation. It's really like against all odds, against the threats of violence, I'm telling you that we're actually going to fill out leadership. We're actually going to be the voice. We're actually going to become the decision makers. And that's the real threat.
Right.
Absolutely. And last thing we'll say about this, then we'll switch over to transportation. I guess the New York of it all is that this is only important because it's New York. If this was any other city, it wouldn't really be. It would be kind of a blip. It'd be important. We talk about Michelle Wu sometimes. She's incredible. We talk about Brandon Johnson in Chicago sometimes. He's great. Karen Bass, whatever. It's a long. It's complicated, but New York is important because it's New York. It's bigger. But the mayor does have some power there, and it does get into actually some of what we can discuss transportation-wise, and some of what I talk about in segregation by design. New York has rich and poor and middle class. It has everything in it. So it's not necessarily a representative sample of the United States, but it is a sort of representative sample of the economy, perhaps, although there's a lot more rich people. Whatever. It is a self-contained economy, is what I'm saying. It has everything. It has middle, upper, lower. It's diverse. It's basically, its own country, right? It has a GDP that's, I think, like 7th in the world, something like that. It's big. This is a unique context because it's New York. It's big, and we need to get progressive mayors in lots of small cities. Yes. But I don't know if that would have that. I don't know if that would result. If the solution we're looking for is obviously fixing the federal government, which is kind of always in the back of everyone's minds. I don't know if like everyone electing a progressive mayor would be great. But in a lot of cities, they've carved themselves up so that such like a lot of people who say they live in Chicago don't live in Chicago. They live in a suburb, and that's where New York gets a little different because it is geographically big too. Versus someplace like LA, which is geographically big, but it's weird shaped, and then there's the county overlaid, and versus someplace like Philly, where like they never really annexed the suburbs in the same way. So there's jurisdictional lines that make this complicated.
Tying into what you do around segregation by design and looking at the highways. And one of the last things you said in the last conversation we had with you is, where the highways were destructive and they displaced people, take them out, just take them out. And I'm like, yeah, just take them out. Just take them out, Adam, just take them out. And so I'm thinking, okay, and maybe you can answer this question because this was a question that I had. So when Robert Moses was building some of these highways, designing and building these highways, was he a city employee? Like, did he work for the mayor, or did he work for the governor?
He worked for the city. He had roles he started in the state and then he moved to the city. He was the parks commissioner for the city, officially, but that he had a bunch of roles kind of simultaneously. He was also head of the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, which is now part of the Port Authority. He worked for the city when he did most of his notable stuff. But
just to tell our guests, Robert Moses was an influencer, power broker, literally, who changed the whole landscape of New York City by putting up bridges. I think was he also over the construction of tunnels, highways for sure, that just bifurcated whole areas of the city, raised poor neighborhoods, immigrant neighborhoods, Black neighborhoods for new development.
And also transit as well. He had subway lines.
Yeah.
Just removed as well.
Right. For folks not familiar, Robert Moses was the head city planner of New York for about 40 years, from the 1930s to the early 1970s. He held, head city planner isn't a real role. He held a lot of different titles over that time. He was never elected to any office. He was appointed. First, he started at the state, where he built. He did transportation projects. He was doing parkways on Long Island. But then once he established his name building these parkways, he was viewed as someone who could build big infrastructure. He got appointed by LaGuardia, Mayor LaGuardia, in the 30s, late 30s, 36, to be New York City Parks Commissioner. It doesn't matter. So over the course of that, over the course of his sort of tenure, he had 12 different roles, but he assembled all these different roles, and he made all the decisions for city planning in New York for, again, about 40 years, including prioritizing cars over transit. That was his MO, basically. He thought that cars were the way of the future. He also was famously racist, and he wanted to support the growth of basically restricted white suburbia out on Long Island and Westchester. So he could do that with these highways that were automobile only, so only for folks who could afford automobiles, typically white at the time, while simultaneously starting transit in the city. So any highway in New York, he built. If you name in New York City, he built. Name one, and he was in charge.
So that's you're kind of bringing in where I was going to go with my initial framing of things. So I asked if he was a city employee, because if he was, and he got those highways built, with Zohran coming in and having control over these city departments, would he have the ability to have some of these highways removed? Okay, that's kind of where the question was going.
No, yeah, because he also created this agency called the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority that was quasi-governmental agency / corporation. It's now part of the Port Authority, but it was like a bi-state agency between Jersey and New York that was a kind of separate from the city, that gave him his own power base. It's kind of one of the reasons it's called the power broker. All the tolls from toll roads went to the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, and then they could also issue their own bonds, which is crazy. Like, he didn't have to get any sort of approval. They could basically print money. So they do not have that ability to. The TBTA is very much a shadow of its former self. It does exist as an entity within the Port Authority. But no, after the Moses era, in reaction to a lot of what he did, that's actually the origin of a lot of New York City's landmarks laws, zoning laws, environmental protection laws. Moses is also the origin of this process called ULURP, the Universal Land Use Review process in New York, which is sort of this infamous process that every building project, every transit project has to go through. It has its positives. It was designed to mitigate the abuses of somebody like Brother Moses, but now it's almost gone too far in the opposite direction. So, Zohran doesn't have unilateral authority. Moses was building, half of when he was building was before the interstate era. So these weren't federal roads, they were owned directly by the TBTA. It's a different era now.
Oh, right. These are all New York State highways that he was building.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the parkways were New York State. The highways, some of them were directly administered by the TBTA.
Yeah.
And some of them still are. You can still see TBTA. So in 56, they create the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 that gives states basically a 90% federal match for any highway projects they're doing. And that was basically written by Robert Moses. That's why he's so important in the whole segregation by design story. Is it's not just New York. It's what they did in New York, everywhere else copied. And what they did in New York got written into law in terms of funding and where they're going to route it. And again, Moses, I forgot to mention, obviously, dropped a lot of these highways on Black and brown communities specifically, because it was killing two birds with one stone. It was creating the connections to the suburbs, whites only suburbs, between between the jobs downtown and then the new suburbs, and then wiping out undesirable neighborhoods close to downtown that might reduce downtown property values. Wiping them out, replacing them with a highway that could actually, that costs money to maintain, but at least there's no people there that will reduce the property values. But removal, do you want to talk about removal? Where to remove?
Yeah, I mean, you said it before, you were like, yeah, just take them out. So how does that happen? What can that happen in New York? Does Zohran have an opportunity to do that, or are you talking about somewhere else?
Yeah, so it can happen in New York. It has happened in New York, in Rochester, New York, not in New York City. Well, no, it has happened in New York City too, in the Bronx. New York State is actually leading in this compared with the rest of the country. They took it out in Rochester. They're planning on taking out even more. It was only a section, but now they're doing the rest. They're taking out one in Syracuse, in next train stop over, and then also looking at potentially taking one out in Buffalo as well. And then, yeah, they took one out in the Bronx. It's similar. It was divided neighborhoods, divided residential area from a park and from a river, from the Bronx River. And this is a project I actually worked on at ACOM, at my day job. We worked with the city, and it was a state project. The state was the client, but we had to work with the city because the city park was there. And part of the point of the project was to connect to the park. So it's a collaborative effort, where it's like that, where it's a vestigial highway that is just not seeing the traffic that it was designed for. You can take that out. And there's a lot of those. 980 in Oakland is a really great example. It divides West Oakland, the heart of the city's Black community, from downtown Oakland. That exact same thing, where it was about protecting the commercial core. This really wide highway, it was built extra wide, both specifically to divide, but then also as a provision for a second Bay Bridge that was never built. A similar thing happened on the other side in San Francisco on Cesar Chavez, because that's where the bridge was going to go. Bridge never got built. The highway does not see much traffic, so just take that out. Yeah, just take it out. It's easy. It's don't necessarily, in the case of Oakland, waste the right of way. There's a great plan out there from a group called Connect Oakland. It is in a trench, so drop a train in there and then do that.
That was going to be my next question. So you're taking out the road, but can you also, what's the likelihood that they would add public transportation instead, so that at least the residents who are in the neighborhoods that were affected by the highway have access to something else, and it's not just a void or a vacuum of no transit at all?
Yeah, well, you take it out and then you fill it in with buildings. That's what they did in Rochester. You took it out, and they take it out, and then you build affordable housing on top. Talking about mitigating the damage caused by highways built through urban areas. right? So there's a couple different strategies that apply directly to the highway itself. There's other things you can do, um, but let's talk about redesigning the highway. So broadly speaking, what has been done in the past, there's three sort of categories. There's capping, which is where you build something over the highway. So you basically leave the highway as it is, but then build something over it. That's easiest when it's in sort of a trench, uh, like when it's in a tunnel without a roof. That's a pretty common, a trench. But it has been done where it's actually just a structure over the top. So basically, capping, you build something over it and then you vent. There's boulevarding, which is where you take a highway and make it so a highway that's in interstate, limited access, only for cars, and you basically make it multimodal. So you make a highway, you add bike lanes. You have to reconnect it to the street grid first. This is what we did in the Bronx with this highway that we decommissioned. So you reconnect it to the street grid, you add crossings, and then you add bike lanes. You can add a tram. San Francisco did this with the Embarcadero Freeway collapse. So they took the right of way, they made a couple lanes of traffic, but then there's a tram and then bike lanes and big sidewalks. So capping, boulevarding. And then the third option, as we discussed, is just removing it and infilling. So the first two kind of keep the right of way, capping and boulevarding, and then the third one totally gets rid of it. There's two types of traffic, freight and passenger, right? Passenger, and there's long distance and short distance. There's that. Passenger, we should be trying to get onto public transit, like short distance intra-city passenger and inter on trains. So that's why. Sorry, my kid's banging at the door. Passenger, we should be trying to get on transit, local transit, long distance transit, or building it such that we can walk, that we have walkable cities, right? Sorry, my kid
Do you need to go get him? Did you do that?
My wife's, he's just the potty is right close to the door here, so I can kind of hear some stuff.
We can hear.
Okay. Passenger, we want to get on the trains. Freight, yeah. So something like the Cross Bronx is really tough because it has a local impact, right? But it serves a regional function. It serves a local function too. But so what does the Cross Bronx do? It's I-95, so it's a long distance corridor that's an inner city road up the whole East Coast, right? And it connects all the most important cities and most important ports. It carries both freight and passenger. And then there's long distance passenger travel, but in an ideal world we could get that onto trains, and we do have some ability to do that in infrastructure in the Northeast. But long distance freight, long distance passenger. And then within the Bronx, there's that always, constantly. And then there's also short distance passenger and short distance freight. All passengers, we just want to get onto trains or buses. And then short distance freight, that's where Zohran actually does have some ability, to regulate the size of trucks. So it's complicated because we're in this era where there's ever more trucks because everyone's ordering so much stuff. And I don't necessarily want to say that we shouldn't be doing that. We probably shouldn't. It's probably not a great model. But either way, we do need the ability to maintain and ship and deliver packages. They do it here in Europe with smaller vehicles, smaller trucks, people on bakfiets, people on small trucks, and then it's also. Sorry, I know this is going too long. Sorry, listeners. My kid really distracted me there.
Blaming the children.
I am blaming the kids, yeah. So we want to get the people on trains, and then we want to get the freight on more. We want to get local freight on more efficient means like smaller trucks. And then in New York, where there's a lot of water, we also want to get it on basically medium, short distance maritime shipping. Which is an initiative the city is doing, and that's with the EDC is doing that. And Zohran could to basically boost that program. Barring a complete redesign of the entire freight system of the Northeast Corridor, we probably need the Cross Bronx Expressway. I really hate to say that. It's like ground zero for these highways, basically, for disruptive highways. It is in a lot of ways. But because it's so important for the economy, the national economy, we kind of need it. And the folks in the Bronx are to some extent realistic about that. That's why the group, the Loving the Bronx, who I've been working with over the years in various capacities, they want a cap, because then you can get some of that land back. The bad thing about a cap is it is a compromise, right? Because you're keeping the highway and you have those vents, so there is still a highway, there's still the pollution. In an ideal world, I-95, it does probably need to exist, but it would not go through the center of cities as it does, especially in New York. It goes right through the middle of the Bronx. But Boston, they should have absolutely removed that. And one of the real...
That one part I'm not following.
The Big Dig.
The Big Dig was you can basically view that as a capping project.
But you're saying they should have done removal rather than capping?
Yes. The worst thing you can do is a cap that is part of a widening project, where you rebuild the highway wider than it was before, but oh look, we put a cap on top. That's what they did in Boston. That's exactly what they did in Boston. But Boston was the elevated through downtown was 6 lanes, 3 in either direction, and that was before the Big Dig. And now after the Big Dig, it's 10 lanes underground in either direction, with a park on top. And then you mentioned it, yeah, the boulevard with 3 more lanes in either direction. So it went from 6 highway lanes to 10 highway lanes, and then another boulevard on top. And yeah, there's the park, but you look at the park and it's like a series of really programmed, like it's like little islands that are surrounded by off ramps and vents. The vents. It's not real land because it's a roof, so it's managed by some of the businesses on the other side. It's not public property. It's a thing.
I just want to pick up on one thing with the Big Dig. So when we talk about the Big Dig project was actually more than just downtown. It actually extended out a little bit further in both directions, north and south, and east into East Boston as well. But I mean, there were like multiple projects that combined to make that come together. So when we talk about removing the Big Dig, I think we don't actually get specific, but we're referencing just the central portion in downtown. But do you think that it could have worked?
Just the central artery is what that was.
Do you think it would have worked if they could have removed more of it?
Yeah, sure. All the way to
Somerville, into Dorchester.
Definitely. Yeah, that would be the thing to do. Take it all out. Drop a train.
What would replace it, though? I guess that's where I'm feeling in my imagination. Like, what would replace it?
Watch the video or watch the animation. So yeah, we're talking about the central artery. That's what, like the part that was the other. I think they called it like the other Green Monster because it was the because the Green Monster's Fenway, but then this thing was big. Yeah, the Big Dig also involved a bunch of crap in like Charlestown with that big loop, and then there was a new tunnel. That's not what I'm talking about. I have an animation of I-93, which is what we're talking about, being built. So what should go there? I don't know. They start with what they took out to build it. Hundreds of houses, hundreds of buildings, thousands of people. It wasn't there 70 years ago. So yeah, take that sucker out and reconnect the streets and put houses back like Rochester did. And yeah, it's not going to be cheap, but it's going to pay for itself 10 times over, like 50 times over, because you'll be making some of the most valuable land immediately. I mean, that gets into the gentrification problem. But even like, if you want to make these projects pay for themselves, you can. There's basically a project in DC. There's a capping project. It's called Capitol Crossing. It's totally a private project, but it's a cap. It's just north of the mall, and it's a cap with these giant apartment buildings on it because they make money. They made land, and now they're going to make money on that apartment. So
because property taxes, is that what you mean?
because they can sell like 500 condos.
Well, who's making the money? The developer's making the money, but the city gets a property tax.
Yeah.
Based.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, now it's useful land again.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a win-win situation. The developer makes money by owning this giant building, and they can sell all the condos. And then, the city gets the property taxes, and they also get a cap. But that's a win, kind of mostly for the developer, right?
So does that answer your question, Derek? Like, when you say,
well,
in your imagination?
Oh, sorry. No, I was. Oh, go on. No, go.
I think Derek was asking. He's trying to imagine what you would if you remove the central artery. What beneficial replacement could there be that impacts or benefits residents and not just developers?
Oh yeah, exactly. Housing, affordable housing.
Well,
yeah, and
it was kind of a two-part. It was two-part. So you're both kind of addressing. So yes, I'm thinking about how does the land become? You're unlocking the value of the land by making it more usable. But getting back to Adam's earlier point, there still needs to be a way to transport freight. And so, despite the central artery tunnel project's flaws in terms of induced demand with traffic, because it went from a 6-lane highway to a 10-lane highway plus 6 lanes on top. By removing that, because I know living where I live in Boston, I would drive to the highway just to get to the north side of the city to get to Somerville. And I know people from Somerville and Cambridge who would do the reverse to get to Roxbury and Dorchester. So it does have its utility because the MBTA, the way it works, it makes it 10 times more complicated and twice as long. Adding a new train line would solve that, but then what happens to the freight? That's kind of getting back to that point, like what happens to the freight transportation?
It doesn't need to go through the middle of downtown Boston.
Yeah, that's the water.
The freight goes on 95, which is the loop.
Because we have that outer loop.
Oh yeah, and in New York, right? But this is the regional issue, right? Yeah, look, local freight. It's the same thing in Boston. You get rid of that highway, it's not the same thing in Boston because in New York you can't get rid of it really. But in Boston, yeah, you get rid of it, and then those passenger trips, well, now you get that onto public transit by building better public transit, by investing as much as we did in public transit, as much in public transit as we did in these highways. Then you'd be able to do that route. And then freight, similar, smaller trucks, less Amazon, unfortunately. Boston, I bet, could do blue highways as well, the waterfront, or the reactivating the working waterfront. Local stuff, and then regional, you get it on I-95, and long-term regional, we need to have more freight on rails. Which we used to have a lot. Yeah, that's another conversation. What do you do on the land? You build affordable housing, because you don't want to. The reason I was bringing up Capitol Crossing, I can't wrap it up, but the reason I was bringing up Capitol Crossing is because these projects are super expensive, but there's models where they just straight up pay for themselves, because because highways are money sinks, because they cost so much for the state to maintain, and they take up a lot of usable space, a lot of taxable space, as Melanie said. So there's a way to make a cap pencil out just by creating all this useful land in a way that's very not equitable. That's just market rate development. That's going to gentrify, basically. The reason a cap can pencil out is because you're taking worthless land and making it really valuable. Suddenly putting a ton of investment on top. Even if there are vents that make some areas not great, they make others better because you've just built this park. So you can make it pencil out in a way that's inequitable, but that's not what we want to do, right? We want to do it in a way that's equitable. So you build housing, you build affordable housing.
So an example would be like the Rose Kennedy Greenway. What we see of that in Boston, you could have affordable housing on that land. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, maybe not specifically there, because the whole 93 corridor is quite long, right? But
Yes, but that idea. So for our listeners to have an idea of something that they can picture is like, oh, I get off, around South Station, and there's this park here where there used to be
a
highway,
neighborhood.
but before that, a neighborhood, which we don't know. We can't picture that because that was so in the distant past. But now there's this park, and that is high. You could say high value real estate down there because anything around there is a financial district. But what you're describing is that kind of surface, that kind of parkland that's on top of a highway could be used for housing and exclusively or primarily deeded affordable housing.
Yeah, I'm saying it really depends on the context. I don't think that where the Rose Kennedy, like where Rose Kennedy is probably a good place for a park. I just don't think it's a good.
I agree.
I don't think it's a good park because there's constantly off ramps. So if you want to make a park, make a real park that's not like a roof, because you also can't really grow trees on it because it's a roof, right? And some later caps are much better about that, especially in Seattle. But if you want to make a park there, that's fine.
But Adam, what you're saying then is where we picture the Route 93, where we're in traffic.
Yes, there should be housing.
If that were not traffic, there would be housing there.
Yeah, so check out, and that's what I show on Segregation by Design.
And perhaps there could be a subway line of some kind running alongside the housing on what is now highway that we sit in traffic on.
Yeah, because if you were there 80 years ago, there would have just been a regular street, and there wouldn't have been a subway, but you better believe there would have been a streetcar line that went right into the central subway. That today we would call it a branch of the Green Line. So I'm bringing this up because we want to reconnect without gentrifying. That's kind of the core. And in some place like the middle of downtown, that's not the
place. Yeah,
that's not a super urgent need because that's commercial.
Where would you now say, instead of roadway, that's highway, that's all these lanes, creating all this pollution, if you could divert the major freight to Route 95 and to the waterway, where in that instance could you replace the cars with houses? And so you're saying much of what we traverse on Route 93 that's open to the air could be replaced with housing, in theory.
Yeah, so definitely. For listeners, I think a great illustrative kind of area is the Newmarket Station.
That's exactly what I was picturing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, great. There you go. Exactly. There's this giant Target and Home Depot parking lot.
It's also an area of the city that's really burdened at this time because of the major city hospital there, but where a lot of poor people go to get their medical care and people with addictions go. And there has been, different versions of what you could call tent cities, or maybe not to the level of tent city, but
yeah,
people living outdoors who have major addiction issues. So that's its perfect example of where you've got the convergence of poverty, highway, and industrial construction, not housing that's accessible and affordable. And so you're saying if you replace that highway with a neighborhood with housing, parks, and some kind of public transport line that's right there because you're close to Newmarket, and put the big freight traffic somewhere else, then people don't need to go through there on cars. They have public transport ways to go through there. And that whole area that really the city is burdened by, because how do you deal with all the basically issues of poverty and lack of housing and substance abuse addiction that shows up there on the street, that you could create a neighborhood.
Yeah, there's also a giant park on the other side of the highway that you would connect that neighborhood to that they're currently divided from. I mean, looking at this area, it's perfect for redevelopment. And, you could also, and the Target and the Home Depot can stay. We have, it's called a parking garage. You don't need this massive surface parking lot that's like the size of half of downtown.
Yeah, it's large, and there is housing that's been developed along that. That mall was expanded in the last 5-10 years, and housing, high-end, high-price housing built right along the edge of it, and in these really small, very narrow streets. But what you're saying is, no, like let's put in actual housing that people who live in that neighborhood could afford, not just speculative housing, and parks, outdoor space for people, and a way for people to get to and from on public transport. And all of a sudden, you just have a different kind of destination. You have a different kind of area to pass through, and you don't forfeit much because the freight traffic could be diverted to Route 95, which already is serving that purpose, and the waterway. And then cars just need to go do something else.
There's a regional rail, a subway stop, and like 10 bus stops like right here. So yeah, cars can do something else. And you
There's
make
not a bus stop there though. Unless Andrew Station.
Okay, Andrew Station seems really far away. But if you look as the crow flies, no, it's
highway. Yes.
It's walkable. I've walked that before.
Yeah.
It's like a 10-minute walk. It's not that far.
And you could put an extension on it. Yeah. So I like this.
But I think the other thing is that's kind of part of this whole thing. And it goes back to our conversations from so many episodes ago, is part of the underlying factor that why we're at where we are now is just the underlying racism that caused all this to be developed in the first place, both in terms of the social policies, the political policies, and then what actually got built in the environment. So I love all these ideas and I wish we could enact them, but I do kind of wonder, is the political will, can the political will be strong enough in a place like Boston, where people have long memories, history exists in the past, present, and future all at the same time? Can people get past some of these entrenched beliefs to do that, to make these changes?
If the city of Boston had all the say, then yeah, but it's I-95 we're talking about. So it gets to the issue at the beginning with all these different levels of jurisdiction, and there's people who profit off the status quo.
In this case, you mean I-93 that we're talking about, because that's
what I meant.
Yeah. Just want to make clear.
Yeah. Thank you. It's this jurisdictional issue, but then the solution that we're underlying this sort of hypothetical redevelopment we're doing in our heads is getting the freight onto 93.
95.
Getting it more onto 95. Yes, sorry. That's no small feat itself. And then we've moved outside the project area. Now we're in a giant regional scale project. Now we have to involve trucking companies. Now we have to involve the state, the feds and the state. It just, because these highways, they cause local problems, but they're part of this national network and this regional network too, that it makes it tough to do much, especially to do really large scale. But somebody like Zohran makes us hopeful. What is great about that rhetoric and about even the label of democratic socialist, what's nice is that it just is a big call for change. It's an obvious call that something is not working, so we're willing to endorse something that we haven't tried before. That sounds terrible. I don't even agree with myself here, because what he did was he got down into the nuts and bolts and made some great suggestions. But I think somebody like him, who can come in sort of fresh-faced and without preconceived notions and preconceived alliances and preconceived stakes and various competing interests, he can come in and give people a new sense of what's possible. And
to actually begin ideating in a different way.
That's it, exactly. To start thinking about removal, to start thinking about not necessarily specific removal, but to start thinking about these big things. Maybe they're possible.
Maybe if you're not removing things, you're plugging in holes, like if you just think about even city provided grocery stores, it's like, okay, if there's a highway running through actually fill in the fact that there's a lack because you live on this side of a highway, for example.
Exactly. Right. And that's what it's about. It's not just about like the highway. It's about solving the problems caused by the highway. So removal isn't always the answer. It is sometimes. But capping sometimes is the correct thing to do as well. And then again, boulevarding is kind of right there in the middle. But yeah, he gives us a sense of wow, well, if we can make that change, maybe we can make other big changes. But it's going to take time, especially with infrastructure.
I appreciate that you ended us on that note, with an essence of hope. I didn't mean to splash cold water on the conversation 5 minutes ago, but so I do appreciate that you're ending us on that note. And thank you again for coming on. For our audience, please visit us online at refreshstrategiestoday.com/blacklining-forum. And be sure to leave your questions and comments on whatever platform you're listening on. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll also add some notes to the show notes so that you can check out websites and other maps and other things that we've been referring to. And with that said, thank you for coming and listening to the Black Lining Forum, and we'll see you next time. Take care.